Hi, good day, and a good day it is indeed as we're moving from summer to fall for sure. I'm here today to talk about the creative process, which frees the body's energy, and to just open the dialogue to your imagination, because today we are fortunate enough to have an illustrator, an artist, a creative person who actually uses the paintbrush to express himself fully in the world. And as we had talked about use of sound and meditation and imagery, metaphor as ways to truly exercise creativity, I would just like to put forth a little seed thought. It seems to me that there are so many parents who come to me with their children who are stressed and often recognize the fact that there's something that happens to this joyful engagement with art and symbols and creativity as one matures. And why has that creative process either diminished with age or become completely extinguished? And why, then, do most adults actually find such difficulty with the creative process as they move into adulthood? Perhaps it is that as we grow older, we learn to copy forms, to limit spontaneous production, and to inhibit self-expression on the whole. And in so doing, we choke off our creative impulse and our healing energy. We develop instead a sophisticated defense mechanism that then offers the body ways of diseasing or diseasing the body and the mind. And so for today, I am here with our special guest, Bryn Barnard, to inspire you to open your mind to a new way of thinking, to reactivate your own creativity and increase your fluency and flexibility and originality of creative thought using meditation and movement or art as a practice, which offers you the possibility of expanding your consciousness and moving your unconsciousness up by multisensory use of art as you did in childhood. So, without any further ado, I am going to share with you a little bit about our special guest, Bryn. Bryn Barnard has been called one of the masters of science fiction art by the Christian Science Monitor and is a multi-talented artist. He has painted historical reconstructions of the National Geographic for the National Geographic Society, documented in the various publications, and also has worked for the U.S. space program for NASA and has created over a beautiful 200-foot mural. And I would like for Bryn to talk a little bit about that for Children's Hospital in Seattle. And it seems that it's more than one mural that he has actually designed and completed. And so as not only an illustrator but also an author, he's here to talk about his own creative process, his work, his passion, his life, and the way that he actually gets to stir up his own creativity. Although Bryn has studied at the University of California in Berkeley and at the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, I believe that all of his power and all of his ideas are within him, ready to be free, to soar, to inspire others to really be with their own creativity, and to talk a little bit about his new work, the book of The Land of Weird. All right, Bryn, there you go. Are you there?
I'm here. Nice to be talking to you today.
Well, thank you for being there. I would like to say that we have quite a task because you are going to have to help me to paint the picture of your beautiful illustrations in this brand new book. So where would you like to begin, and how would you like to, let's say, create an introduction for people to set the tone?
Well, The Land of Smeared, which is dream spelled backwards, is a book by Andrea von Bodefor, and it's published by No Wonder Publishing. The idea for Smeared was created by Andrea's sister, Angela Russell, when she was a child, and 30 years later, a couple of years ago, Andrea wrote the story, put it to verse. I was contacted by the publisher and asked if I'd be interested in illustrating the book, illustrating the story of a child's journey to the land of dreams, and illustrating it in a particular way so that it wouldn't just be about this journey to the land of dreams, but also how dreams can be used as a way of changing a person's personal reality. And they wanted to...
Changing a person's what?
Personal reality. As a way
what does that mean?
That these were not just sort of dreams that you have at night, or nightmares or daydreams, but actually that dreams can be a way of actually changing a person's experience as they travel through life. So this was new for me, and so it took a little bit of education to sort of understand what the publisher was looking for, and it took some education for me talking. I interviewed the author and the publisher at some length several times. We had several just conversations about the book and the background of the story, which is it seems to be a rather straightforward story about what happens if you go into this world where everything is backwards, where the land is smeared, what the schools are like, what the landscape is like, what the people are like, and how we could take this to the next level visually, so where the words would take on a secondary and tertiary meaning. And so so after these conversations, I did an entire sketchbook of ideas for the way that the story could possibly unfold, and then from there, many different sketch versions of the story, and ultimately we ended up with paintings that are now in the book. Beautiful.
I know that in Greek language, the word metaphor means to carry across, to move from one thing to the next. And when you're working with art in the way that you do, how could you describe the use of metaphor in your work?
Well, in the case of The Land of Smeared, metaphors are there are visual metaphors throughout the book. And for example, there's one portion of the book where the story talks about how nightmares are created, and they're essentially dreams that bump into each other by accident and create sort of stories that really don't belong together. And we tussled with this for some time to try and figure out how can you express that in a way that readers, and this is a picture book meant for children, could easily understand that. And we hit upon the idea of using animals as metaphors for different kinds of dreams.
Okay, so can I take an excerpt from the book just to illuminate that particular idea?
Certainly.
Again, this is, we're speaking with Bryn Barnard, and we're talking about the book he recently illustrated entitled The Land of Smeared. And smeared is dreams spelt backward. So in the beginning of the book, it offers just a nice, once upon a time, there was a land called Smeared, and to an ordinary person, smeared might have seemed quite weird. You see, smeared is where dreams live when they're not busy coming true. This is where they wait to be dreamed up by you. That's a beautiful introduction, isn't it?
It is.
Kind of opens up the child's mind and whoever is the reader to, ooh, I wonder what I can dream of right now. It's such a perfect segue into dream time, and to really understand the power of dream time. I know that I'm so fascinated by your background in anthropology, Bryn, because I, too, have studied cross-culturally the use of symbols and as they reflect the properties of healing the mind, body, and spirit of the individual, and that was my interest in my doctoral study. But as we move through talking about this book, I wanted to know if you knew anything about the Senoi tribe in Malaysia, where they actually encourage children to go back into their dream time and to change, let's say, the falling in a dream to flying, and to re-empower the dreamer, that they are the creators of their dreams, and they can go back into a frightening dream or a nightmare, and they can actually design the desired outcome and not be a victim of, let's say, being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, but rather seeing themselves turn and fight and face their fear. Or if they're falling and their dream is about falling, they can turn that falling into flying and overcome or surmount whatever it is that they were falling from. Do you know anything about that particular culture?
Of course, the Senoi. I've spent about 5 years living in Malaysia and Indonesia, and the Senoi are famous there as
the Senoi tribe. Yes,
as the dream people.
Right.
But and although I haven't spent time with them personally, I've read about them and about exactly what you were describing, the way the guided dreaming and the empowered dreaming that they are uniquely capable of doing. But they live in an environment. Malaysia is like the United States, a multiracial country, and it's actually a fascinating place to visit to see how the solutions they've come up with, having Malays, Chinese, Indians, and many other kinds of people living very close together in close proximity and quite peacefully. But the belief in dreaming is something that and the power of dreams pervades that society. People, those different societies that make up the Malaysian world, dreams are given a lot of credibility for. They have a lot of traditional power in foretelling the future, into commenting on current events.
Wait, you're speaking something that I've never heard of, and I'm sure there are other people who are skipping over that and wondering, what did he just say? Can you describe that a little bit and speak it a little more slowly so we can understand?
Sure.
Yes.
Well, let's see, what's the way to put it? Well, when I initially went to Malaysia as an exchange student in high school, and my host family there, it turns out, were shamans. They were. I had a host mother and brother and sisters, and the sort of the family business was healing, and it was done in many. And each member of the family had a sort of a different specialty.
Okay, so the family business was what?
Was healing through using the traditional belief system that they had. So even though my family, they were devout Muslims, they also had a belief system that preceded the arrival of Islam in Malaysia, and they used this to, and part of this involved dreaming. Someone would actually say, "Come to my host mother, troubled by a dream of, like you described, being chased in the jungle, say perhaps by a crocodile," and she would help that person deal with that dream. With suggest it might be by taking a talisman that she would create and have them take that to bed with them that evening, and use that as a way of changing the person's dream so that it would no longer bother them. Or someone might have a recurrent dream about, say, a member of the family who was in distress, and they would they would use this as a way of discussing maybe other problems that the person might have that this dream might be creating. So I don't want to go off into great depth about this, but they essentially, my host family, they were sort of combination traditional doctors and counselors,
Wow.
and they used a lot of different phenomena that people experienced in the village to deal with problems they had. It's a very different culture from our own. For example, Malays see the seat of the emotions as the liver, not the heart. They have things that we would seem to think inconsequential can have great portent in their world. For example, if you sit down at a table and are about to eat, about to have dinner, and
Yes.
and you're about to eat food, and then something calls you away so that you're not able to take that first bite, that's a terrible ill-omened thing to do, and will ultimately have, it's traditionally believed, terrible consequences. And I saw this happen before my eyes. My parents from the U.S. came to visit me, and we were going to sit down at a meal, a huge feast that was prepared for them, and just before we were about to take our first bite, someone rushed in and said, no, before you eat, you have to come over to our house and have tea over there. And so we did. We got up and went over there, and on the way back, my father tripped and broke his foot. And everyone said, "You see," and the term for that in Malay is called kumpuna, and all the villagers looked knowingly at each other and said, "You see, kumpunan." So it's a different world, and I won't go.
So let me see if I get this correctly, because we're having some technical difficulty understanding you through the phone that you are using. So
am I speaking too softly?
Yeah, so when I take a break, which is coming up very shortly, and I play an excerpt from the Mind Works for Children series, what I'd like you to do, Bryn, is to just hang up and call back on another line.
Okay.
And see if Rebecca can help us to get a clearer channel, because you're coming in very blurred, and I can hardly understand the words, so I'm wondering how it's coming out. And I would love for people to hear what you're saying, because it's incredibly fascinating and very important as I am looking at what our conversation is going to be discussing and unfolding in the next few moments. So we're going to take a commercial break. I'm going to play a bit of a excerpt, and when we come back, stand by, because Bryn will continue to tell us a little bit about his extraordinary experiences literally around the world, and how we are one family, and there are some commonalities, but there are also some very interesting differences culture to culture that we can learn from each other, and something that we can glean as we are talking about the subject of art and creativity. All right, so here we go. Okay, Bryn, you can just hang up and call back. This is just a little excerpt from a grain of sand, I can make a pearl. A melody calling to you with the rhythm of waves in the sea. Feel the notes as they hum and play, gently tapping over you, waking up your mind works and imagination too. Music frees your own heart song. Breathe deep, breathe long. Oh yes, breathing deep and breathing long is how you find the moment of magic, the magic of now. And now that you know purling begins with Y-O-U, now is the moment to try something new. Say to yourself, myself happy. Close your eyes now, breathing in, breathing out. And imagine, when you open them, you're in the middle of a warm, sunny day. Hear the ocean and children play. Imagine you are standing on the purling beach. Stretch up your arms above your head to reach. Then bend down to touch the sand. Perhaps you'd like to hold your pearl in the palm of your hand. Breathing in, stretching up. All right, that was an excerpt from A Grain of Sand, I Can Make a Pearl. And the idea being that there is a time when you can actually tap into your inner resources and your creativity, and it helps to still the body and the mind and to get into a kind of altered state or conscious relaxation state. There are so many ways that we miss the opportunity to slow down and bring our attention inward, turn our attention away from the day and bring our attention inward to our breathing so that we can just begin to allow something to pop in and to surface. It's as if we're tuning into a radio channel and we're waiting and listening for something wonderful to come to us that may help us. It could be a word or a phrase or an image. Whatever it is, it's part of the natural course that creativity takes. But you can't get there without first slowing down. So, about our beautiful illustrator who's here on the line with us, we are speaking to Bryn Barnard. Bryn's beautiful artwork has been very accomplished and well known, but the work that he has done recently has a technique called glazing. It's the use of many layers of tinted oils over monochromatic opaque underpainting, and has been around since at least the 12th century. In fact, one of my favorite artists, Maxfield Parrish, in his paintings, had this dazzling technicolor effect, which is really entirely dependent on the technique glazing. It's the slow drying time of oil paint. It has made that medium rare in today's tight, deadlined illustration world, and the laborious and even slower technique of glazing has almost become extinct. However, I'm happy to hear that with some oily tricks and an oven in his basement, Bryn has found a way to revive the ancient technique to achieve the saturation of luminosity he finds so compelling, and I do too, and he can still meet his deadlines. His resulting paintings are alive with detail and full of narrative, and I can say they are luminous. They have a quality of brilliance and luster that really does draw you right into the painting, as if you really could jump into the painting. It's so awesome, Bryn.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. All right, so you were just talking to us a little bit about the Senoi tribe, and I wanted to just ask you to recap a little bit where we left off. So you were saying that sometimes different cultures have different customs, and this one about sitting in at the table.
Sure.
And if you had an inner calling to get up and go somewhere, tell me more about that. What would happen?
Well, what I was describing before was something called kumpunan, and it's a Malay belief that it's a bad thing to thwart your desires. There's a belief in Malay culture that what's most important is to kind of maintain cosmic harmony between all peoples. Malay villages tend to be very pretty peaceful places. Interaction between people is quite
So you want to maintain what kind of harmony?
Cosmic harmony. The idea is that
neat.
it's really
cosmic harmony.
Cosmic harmony. Yeah, there's this idea that we're all living things exist in this cosmic reality, and it's part of people's jobs. This is not a Muslim belief. This is a Malay belief that really pre-exists Islam, and that it's part of the best way to exist, the best way to achieve the happiest results is to maintain balance, maintain harmony, and Malay social relations are structured to that end. And this belief that I just explained, Kempunan, is that if you're it's actually translated as a food disaster. And if you are about to sit down at the dinner table or the lunch table or the breakfast table and about to eat, and something interrupts you at the just before you're about to take that first bite, that disrupts harmony, and consequently something bad will happen. And I thought, well, when I first heard about this, I was as disbelieving as the next Westerner.
Right, you thought, well, that's kind of ridiculous. How bad could it get, right?
Pretty silly, yeah. Except that I saw it happen before my eyes, and it could have just been coincidence, but it did happen. My parents from the United States were visiting. My dad, a hard-headed engineer. My mother, a writer and actress. They came to my host family's house. A big meal was set out on the table, glorious feast. We sat down, and we truly were about to take the first bite when a neighbor rushed in and said, wait. We prepared a big tea at our house, and we were expecting you to come there. Well, no one, at least I didn't know that. I didn't know what the schedule was. And so my parents, being polite people, said, oh, well, we'll go there first. That's okay, not a problem. And my family was looking at each other with these dark looks, and they were muttering, Kempunan. And up to that point, I'd never heard that word. So we got up, and we went over to the neighbor's house, had a lovely tea, a high tea with lots of delicious food. And it was about 100 yards away, and we walked back, and my dad hadn't taken 4 steps when he tripped and broke his foot. He broke a metatarsal, and for the rest of their 3-week vacation in Malaysia, he had his foot in a cast.
Wow.
So it was, and when we got back to my house, my family, they looked knowingly and said, "We told you, Kempunan." And
well, that's very interesting because whether your belief system followed it or not, it seemed to be in that particular atmosphere that is indeed what occurs.
Well, what occurred, and this is the way this was their interpretation of what happened. There's a lot of other things. There's a lot of phenomena that happen in Malay culture. There are cultural phenomena that really don't happen here, but it's different ways of dealing with, say, human interaction. I know you don't want to have the entire conversation about Malaysia, but I'll just give one other example.
Well, I don't know. Maybe we do. I mean, I want you to know that what you're speaking is actually we're going to be able to pull back and make some universal lessons and application here. So we're taking the microcosm and looking at it right now, and that's fine because I can see the value and the application as it affects all cultures and all people. So,
I'll give you one other example. This is called Lata. is a phenomenon which is you find in 2 cultures. You find it in Malay culture and in Inuit culture. In fact, it was first identified in Inuit culture, and there it's called Arctic hysteria. But in Malaysia, it's called Lata. It's very widespread. And what the phenomenon is that if a person is surprised or startled, they'll often they'll say something they don't mean to say. And we've experienced this here, where you get startled, and if you're not normally a person who uses profanity, you might say something you didn't mean to say, or you might say, oh, whatever. But in Malaysia, what will happen is that the person will be unable to stop themselves from saying things they don't mean to say, and if they're goaded and provoked, this can go on for hours, and they can be provoked and goaded into dancing until they fall exhausted to the ground. And typically, a lata, and it's used as both a noun and a verb. A lata is a person who has this affliction, is typically one of the weaker members of society. Women have it more than men, and poorer people have it more than richer people. People who, for whatever reason, are lower on the social order in the village are the ones who are usually the latas. And it's something, but there's also another phenomenon called kunchi, which means lock or key. And you can, if you're in the right frame of mind, you can lock the lata so it will go away. But so this is something that we don't really see here because of the way that our culture is structured. But there, it's an expected thing. People expect that this occurs. People grow up seeing this, and inevitably some people become latas. So it's a different world.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about, if you could, the creative process itself. Not only how did you keep it alive from your childhood to your adulthood, but if you want to tap back into the other cultures that you have lived in and what you were able to, let's say, learn or see while you were living there, I would be fascinated to find out more about what you've learned from other cultures and how they actually keep that energy, that vital life force alive. Their artistic process that, engages both the spontaneity and the kind of incubation, meditation, if you will, aspect to all great works of art.
Sure. Well, I was blessed to grow up in a family with parents who encouraged my artistic interest from a young age. My father, as I said, is a hard-headed engineer, but he loved to draw. And my mother is a writer and an actress. And when they saw I was interested in drawing, they encouraged it. And soon after I started school, they let me take art lessons from a local Czech emigre named Nellie Allen. And she told them at some point, well, I think he has what it takes to be an artist. And so, and in fact, I often got report cards that would come home from school that said, Bryn is a good student, but he should spend more time doing math homework and less time drawing in class. I have probably 20 or 30 postcards, grade reports from the time I was in first grade up through middle school where I would get these. And so, but I continued pursuing this, and then, from a young age, so I tried all sorts of different kinds of art as I was growing up. I tried puppet making and sculpture and watercolor and oil painting and without any particular direction to what I wanted to do. I just knew I really liked to do art, and I had no idea how I would pursue this as an adult. When I reached high school, I was fortunate to have another teacher. His name was Hal Akins, and he had an interesting combination of jobs. He was the football coach, and he was the art teacher. And he had a very structured way of teaching art in the classroom to give us basically tools that we could use to be able to express ourselves. He taught us, this was sort of basic part of the Western academic canon, where we learned about hue, value, and chroma. We learned about the color wheel. We learned about complementary colors. We learned about shades and tints. And this is all very Western. Because, for example, if you look at what we consider the colors, the color wheel, what we consider colors in our world, say it's different than the Malay world, different than the Chinese world. They have and there's different significance to colors there. I'll just do it a little.
What do you mean by that? Give us an example of how they're different.
Well, I'll give you an example. Years later, I was working in the advertising industry in Malaysia, and I was studying intercultural visual communication, and there was one of the clients of this Chinese ad agency I was working for. They were a Western company with Western shareholders, and they'd had a really, really good year. And they wanted to show in their report, part of the brief that the ad agency got was to create an annual report for them that would express the great good fortune that they'd had. Well, in Chinese culture, the most appropriate color you can use to show wealth and good fortune is red, and yellow is another good color for that. And if you see Chinese New Year cards, they're typically heavy with red and yellow meaning gold, prosperity. And so this annual report was printed in red ink on pink paper. And it was sent out to all the shareholders, who were horrified, because even though they were seeing good numbers, they were written in red ink. And red ink has a very different connotation in the West. And what they were seeing, the conscious message they were getting was, it's a good year. The subliminal message they were getting was, we're losing money. And so they got, the shareholders, many of the shareholders wrote into the company very upset, wondering what was going on. They didn't get the message. This did not produce the message of confidence that they were expecting it to produce. There's another example. This was a successful communication. When I was working in Hong Kong, there was a rat eradication poster that was used, and it was printed on white paper in blue and black. And that combination of colors is often used. They have funerary connotations, and so the visual the word communication talked about, watch out for rats, and here's the number to call if you see them, so we can bring out the rat eradicator. And it was printed with a blue rat printed with black ink on white paper, and so there was this subliminal thing that was supporting that idea. So those are two examples of the connotations that color have for one audience that might not have for another. And if you're working in that particular society, you have to be aware of what each different culture in Malaysia, because there's, as I said before, Malays, Chinese, Indians, and Aboriginal cultures all living side by side. If you're creating a communication, you have to be aware how each of those cultures will perceive them. And often the problems that are had is when someone neglects to take that into consideration, how one thing will be perceived by one culture, and the culture right next to it, seeing the exact same communication, will perceive something quite different.
Right, exactly. That's really a good example. And since art is free flowing and it has this aspect to it of, I would say, just creativity and creative energy, there really is a play of conscious to unconsciousness around art, and it has been so for many years. One of the things that I like so much about the book, The Land of Smeared, which is dreams spelt backwards, is the beauty of the imagery, where you use rich color wheels like the mandala, as for example, as one of the motifs or symbols that seems to be repeated throughout the book. And we know from meditative arts, at least, that the mandala really has its own, let's say, properties, and that most mandalas have an intuitive character as they exert a kind of influence on the viewer or the painter who paints the mandala. Could you describe to kids and families who might be listening how to draw a mandala, how they could envision a mandala?
Certainly. Well, first, let me say that just to talk a little bit about the mandalas in the book. This was a collaborative process, as I think I said earlier on, working with the author Andrea van Bodevoort and the creator of Smeared, Angela Russell. And Angela.
Right. So Andrea and Andrea are sisters, right?
Well, Angela and Andrea are sisters, correct? Yes.
Right. And it was the sister who actually conceived of the story when she was a young girl.
Right. That's Angela.
And actually. That's right, and actually did draw a mandala. Is that true?
That's correct. Although it wasn't specifically part of the story. From the time she was like a preteen, Angela was interested in this kind of design, not realizing, this is what I find fascinating, not realizing there were mandalas, not realizing this art form is extraordinarily ancient and is used.
Right, and that is a testament to the universal mind, if you believe in that.
Certainly.
Right.
She thought she'd invented something all on her own.
Right. It was something intuitive that came from her unconscious mind. She did not consciously know anything about it, but somehow there is a field of information. We'll call it the invisible realm. Some people have been talking about it more in the 21st century than we ever have before. But basically, even as an engineer or a scientist, the hardcore scientists are realizing that there really has been more evidence, if you will, for the fact that there is a lot of information and a lot of activity that's going on in the space between, let's say, what we say is the physical world or what looks like a physical form. And in that realm or in that field of the invisible, there is quite a lot of activity, vibration, information. And this information was accessible for this young person, as she had no idea where it came from. It comes from your imagination, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is the beauty of the book and also of the creative process, which we're talking about. And I just want to give a little station break here. You're listening to Mind Works for Children. This is Dr. Roxanne Daleo. If you have any interest in hearing this interesting interview again, you can go onto our website, mindworksforchildren.com, and look up the archive. We're talking with Bryn Barnard, who is an illustrator and has fascinating background in cross-cultural, I'd say, just living and learning, and is here talking with us today about one of the books that he has recently illustrated called The Land of Smear. Can you and would you like to tell the listening audience where they might be able to reach you, Bryn?
Oh, certainly. Well, I'm available on my website. There's contact information there. It's www.brynbarnard.com. That's BrynBarnard.com. And there's examples from the book that we're talking about here. If they want to find out about the Land of Smeared specifically, you can go to www.thelandofsmeared.com, and that's just like it's spelled.
All right, so let's get back to the value of drawing mandalas as well as the beauty of them. So go ahead and tell us again how to make a mandala and why they are so powerful and helpful in focusing, centering, and balancing.
Well, a mandala is a visual aid of sorts for focusing the mind, and the mandalas, called as they are, originated in Hindu culture, but you find mandala-like devices in many, many different traditional cultures, and typically they take different forms. But a typical mandala is a series of concentric circular patterns that take the mind from the outside, take the eye from the outside to the center. They guide the eye from the outside to the center, and if the attention falters, you're again brought to the center. Typically, the center of a mandala is a quiet central point, and the outside of as you get further and further out, the
right. Now, if you were to let's say sit a group of children down to help them design a mandala to create their own, how would you instruct someone in actually creating a mandala? I actually thought that they were supposed to be quartered, but that might not be true. I'm curious to know how you actually describe or instruct someone to create a mandala.
Well, it's kind of exactly as you said. The patterns are repeated. You basically divide. Take a circle. You just determine the exterior of the mandala, what the total size is going to be, and then you find the center point of what it's going to be. Divide it into quarters. Divide it into 4 sections, and you can then create a series of concentric circles that will come from the center point to the outside. And these can be first dividing the space in half, and then each of those spaces in half again, so that you get an equal number of concentric circles. And then, starting from the center, you create basically each one of those bands. In each of those quarters of the band, you're going to create the same pattern. And the patterns can be made up of triangles. They can be made up of circles. They can be made up of sometimes they're actually made up of actual images of things. The Buddhist mandalas often incorporate images of the Buddha. Other mandalas have pictures of animals or whatever that are repeated along each band. So each band has the same pattern repeated again and again. So that each quarter, if you look across from each other, it's the same way. You can also subdivide so that you have a north-south axis that's dividing into quarters. You can subdivide that again into an east-west axis so that you're dividing into eighths. You can subdivide it that way. And you always start at the center and work your way out to the outside. This kind of process can be done in paint. It can be done in things like stones. It can be done with sticks. It's done if you've ever seen a Tibetan sand painting. It's done with bits of colored sand, where, and in fact, these kind of mandalas, which are done by often a team of people, a team of Tibetan monks working simultaneously in each of the quarters of the mandala, working their way from the center to the outside. Depending on the size, it can take several days, a week, or a month or more. And then when those mandalas are completed, when that kind of sand mandala is created, it's just colored sand on a horizontal surface. It's then swept away, and it as sort of an allegory for the Buddhist belief in the ephemeral nature of existence.
I'm under the impression that just to gaze upon these mandalas as a tool in meditation in Indian tradition can actually help someone to focus and center themselves. Is that true?
That's correct. Yeah. The idea is that it's a basic, like I said initially, a visual aid as a way of basically focusing your mind and cutting out all of the stimuli that kind of basically busies us throughout the day: the sights, the sounds, the smells, the internal dialogue that's going on in our head, whatever's keeping us busy, and it's a way of quieting the mind. And of course, the Hindu-Buddhist tradition has come up with many ways of doing this. The mantra, which is a repeated sound, is another way of doing that. There's other way, and it basically puts you into what I guess you would into a suggestible, semi-hypnotic state.
Right.
And as long as you're able to maintain that focus, the state is achievable and sustainable for someone who is practiced at this. The mandala is only really needed as a starting point for someone who's earlier on in it. You can maintain it, get that focus, maintain it briefly, lose the focus, then have to use the mandala again and again. So meditating in front of that, looking at that as a way of essentially narrowing the scope of your world to where you're just really able to deal with not with what's going on in this plane of existence, but beyond it.
Right. So, in just seeing if we can give practical application for what we're speaking about today in terms of unleashing creativity and helping even adults get back into their own creative process, I would like to invite people to just think of creating a mandala in some way that's as simple as drawing a circle on a large piece of paper. It could be a paper bag that they have handy because they've got so many of them, and crayons, or they could use markers or paints, or maybe you've got a whole jar full of buttons and you want to just invite your children to use up the buttons and put a pattern onto the page by gluing the buttons down as if you would glue down, let's say, sequins or beads. All of these are ways that you can illuminate the art and make it so that all of your energy is put into concentrating into this one moment of time and this one activity. So in summarizing how you actually inspire yourself, I'm curious to know what you would say about that and what you would give away to the listening audience.
Well, in my own artistic process, I work consciously and using kind of what you call left brain to design and analyze and figure out what the subject of my work is going to be. But I also use my right brain, my servant, and work unconsciously. And one of the ways that I work, I don't actually meditate on mandalas, but I run every day for about an hour a day. And that's often where I get my best creative solutions. I empty my mind, go into an alpha state, and just really stop thinking about whatever the particular issue that's keeping my conscious attention. And often, by the end of that hour, I've come up with a solution or some color combination or subject or whatever that I've been trying to think about will pop into my head. It might be something that a problem I gave myself a couple days before, maybe an hour before, but it's a really great way for me to try and engage that part of my mind. I also, when I work, when I draw, I have to have complete silence. When I paint, I often have music and other things to sort of engage that analytical part of my mind so that the other side can really deal with just creating colors and patterns on paper.
That's awesome, and it's a beautiful process. I can just feel it myself as you describe it. So do you have any hints for young people who are feeling that art is a way that they can express themselves, and would you be able to share, let's say, something of a guide or a key to keeping their own creativity open?
Well, I'd suggest that keeping doing it is the best way of keeping art alive, making it a part of your daily, I guess you could say, your daily practice, and not letting that atrophy. And often when we get to about age 12 in our culture, some people get frustrated what they intellectually can see of the world and what they're able to do with their own hands. Kind of they start to separate. So I'd suggest moving beyond that and keep doing that. There's a great book, by the way, that I've often suggested to people, and it's Betty Edwards' Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. A wonderful book for getting people to really engage that part of themselves.
And say the name of it again?
Betty Edwards, and the book is Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain.
Right, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, which has lots of activities.
It does, yeah.
Do you use meditation as part of your integral process for work? And if so, how does it assist you?
Well, beyond the running that I described, no, I don't. I've studied meditation in the past, but actually, when I run, one of the things I do to try and empty my head is I actually use a mantra when I'm running. Yeah, if I find that I just can't stop thinking about whatever I've just that dialogue going on, I'll just use a mantra just over and over and over again to try and sort of just empty my head so that I can stop thinking and start enjoying the sounds and the sights. I run through a wood that's near our house, so I can just experience that.
Well, Bryn, I just want to thank you so much for being a part of our show and for giving us the opportunity to find out more about not only you as an artist, but just your work and your life. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is Dr. Roxanne Daleo for Mind Works for Children. Have a great day. Until next week, helping children help themselves, body, mind, and spirit.